Alright, today we're doing lesson 96, found on page 627 in your books. It's titled, Using Reciprocals to Divide Fractions. Sorry the Promethean board is kind of squished today. I haven't been able to figure out how to make it work properly. But the four objectives, two of them we just covered, I guess, on Friday, last week Friday. It says find a reciprocal of a whole number or a fraction, remembering that the reciprocal of 4, remember that if you want to see 4 as a fraction, you put it over 1. The reciprocal when you invert that fraction is just 1 over 4. Okay, putting the numerator in the denominator in the numerator. Divide 1 by a fraction using a reciprocal. Again, we covered that last week. It says multiplying two fractions. That's something that we've covered before. And then finally using manipulatives to model multiplication of fractions. And we'll do that using the manipulatives on the board. If you turn your page, I guess if you leave your page, on page 627 it says reciprocals can help us solve division problems such as the following. And the following is found right here. 1/2 divided by 2/3. Now we know how to do that, we know how to take the shortcut, but I hope that today we can kind of learn what dividing fractions actually means. Dividing fractions, 1/2 divided by 2/3 is basically asking us how many 2/3 are there in 1/2. So how many times does this 2/3 go into this 1/2? Well, you can tell that 2/3 is clearly bigger than 1/2, so hopefully our answer ends up being less than 1, because if there was 1 2/3 in 1/2, it would clearly be bigger than the 1/2, so our answer should end up being less than 1. Alright, 1/2 divided by 2/3, we know that we flip-flop this fraction. Division goes to multiplication. When we invert the fraction 2/3, it goes to 3/2. We multiply. 1 times 3 is 3. 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, so there are 3/4 of these 2/3 that fit in the 1/2. Now I'm going to read, because I think they do a pretty good job of explaining what dividing fractions actually is. The problem means how many 2/3 are in 1/2. However, since 2/3 is more than 1/2, the answer needs to be less than 1. So we change the question to how much of 2/3 is in 1/2. How much of 2/3 are in 1/2? The problem is different from the problems we have been solving. To solve this problem, we will use another method. This method uses reciprocals to help us find the answer. We begin by asking a different question. How many 2/3 are in 1? Okay, so instead of dealing with how many 2/3 are in 1/2, how many 2/3 are in 1? Well, that answer is its reciprocal. How many 2/3 are in 1? Well, there are 3/2 in 1. Okay, and that is our reciprocal. There are 3/2 in 1. There are 3/2 of 2/3 in 1. And that just means that, again, 3/2 of 2/3 is equal to 1. And that's why we use that reciprocal. Okay? Hopefully, as we do some practice problems, that's a little bit easier to understand. It says step 1, how many 2/3 are in 1? The answer is 3/2, which is the reciprocal of 2/3. Step 2, the number of 2/3 is 1/2 the number of 2/3 in 1. So we multiply 3/2 by 1/2. When we do that, we find that our answer is 3/4. And if you look in the middle of page 628, they show the different ways to do that. You can first use the reciprocal. That reciprocal will tell you how many. The reciprocal of 2/3 is 3/2. That tells you how many 3/2 are in 1. You then multiply that number by the term that they were asking you about before. Okay, 1/2 divided by 2/3. 1/2 divided by 2/3. Okay, we find the reciprocal because that is how many 2/3 are in 1. Okay, there are 3 over 2 2/3 in 1. Then you multiply that by the fraction to give you the answer. Again, hopefully we practice that a little bit and we can learn a little bit more about it. Example number 1, you will write down in your sheets 2/3 divided by 2/3 divided by 1/2. Okay, how many 1/2s are in 2/3? Now we know that there are 2 over 1. If we took 1/2 of 2 over 1, that would equal 1. That's why we're using the reciprocal first. We switch our division sign to multiplication. We leave the 2/3 alone. Now when we multiply, 2 times 2 is 4. We get 4/3. We of course simplify that fraction, or reduce that improper fraction by dividing 4 by 3. Our answer ends up being 1 1/3, which is what you'll write down on the first line, or the first example line on your answer sheets. Okay, the next problem says divide 2 divided by 2/3. Alright, if we want to use 2 as a fraction, we put it over a 1. We switch the division to multiplication, and we use the reciprocal, or we invert the second fraction. Okay, you multiply. 2 times 3 is 6. 1 times 2 is 2. You divide 6 divided by 2. I already know that that is 3. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So your answer for the second example is 3. Okay, let's do a few practice problems. I would like you to do practice problem H on example number 3 line. The third example. Example H says 3 divided by 2/3. Okay, 3 divided by 2/3. Again, if we want to make this a fraction, you can put a whole number over 1 and it doesn't change its value. Division switches to multiplication. We invert the fraction 2/3 to get its reciprocal. And then you multiply straight across. 3 times 3 is 9. 1 times 2 is 2. You reduce that improper fraction by dividing. You end up with an answer of 4 1/2. And that's your answer for example 3. Put that down for example 3, please. Alright, and example 4, under the example 4 line, I'd like you to do lesson practice J. How many 1/3 are in 3/4? How many 1/3 are in 3/4? Alright, now hopefully when you see these sort of word problems, how many 1/3 are in 3/4, you understand that you need to put the fractions down basically in the opposite order. Alright, and you put them down in the opposite order. Now that we know that 3/4 divided by 1/3, you invert the fraction and you multiply straight across. Alright, so 3/4 doesn't change. Your division sign switches to multiplication. We have 3 over 1. 3 times 3 is 9. 4 times 1 is 4. 9 divided by 4 is 2 1/4. Okay, put the answer 2 1/4 down on the fourth example line. Again, when you see how many 1/3 are in 3/4, that tells you that you're dividing fractions. It tells you that this is the first term, this is the second term, and then you put a division sign in the middle of it. If you ever had 1/3 of 4, okay, you can replace the word of with a multiplication sign. 4 goes over 1, and you multiply straight across. 4/3, 4 divided by 3 is 1 1/3. Okay, and I will see you tomorrow.